In this video, I will demonstrate how to prompt for a date range in a SAS Visual Analytics report. First, I will list the available control objects and techniques we will use to filter our report data. The first technique will automatically filter the report or page report objects. The location of the prompts must be in either the report or page prompt area. The available control objects to use for this technique is a slider with the style input of range. The second technique requires manual steps to filter the report objects. The location for the prompts must be in the report canvas. The available control objects include a single value slider, a drop-down list, and a text input. I will then walk through how you configure both from and to date parameters. We will need to define filters for each of the report objects we want to filter for this date range. Let's get started with the demonstration. I will be using SAS Visual Analytics 8.4 for the hands-on portion of the video, but the same techniques can be used for earlier versions of SAS Visual Analytics. Let's get started with the first technique I covered, which is the automatically filtered option. In the target version of the report, you can see that I have used the page prompt area and a slider control object with the range input style. You can see that as I move the slider endpoints, both of the report objects filtered based on my selections. Let's switch to my pre-built report. I am now in edit mode, looking at the first page of the report. I want to expand the page prompt area. The first thing I want to do is drag a slider control to the page prompt area. From our objects pane, I'm going to filter for the slider control and drag it to the page prompt area. Next, I need to assign the date role. From the roles pane, I will select our date data item. Now you can see how moving the slider endpoints updates both of the report objects in this page automatically. You can even use the calendar date picker. This technique is viable when you have a reasonable amount of dates to select from, thereby making the sliders easy to navigate. If you find that you have many dates in the high thousands, then the range slider may make it difficult to easily use the endpoint sliders. Keep watching to learn about our next techniques, and you may find that it's easier for your report users to select to and from date values. Let's switch back to our target report to learn about the next technique I will walk through and how to configure. Clicking over onto the next page of the report for the slider single value, here you can see a slider with the input style of single value. In this report page, I've configured the report objects to display the 5 days prior and 5 days after to the selected date value. I've also configured a display rule to highlight the selected value. If you are wondering why I may not always have 5 days prior and 5 days after, it's because I have gaps in my data, and this data source does not have any values for Sunday. Let's switch to our pre-built report to configure this page. The first step we take will be similar to our previous example. We will add the control to the report, but not in the page prompt area. Expanding the page prompt area just to make sure that I do not add the control to the wrong place. From the objects, again, I will look for the slider control and drag it into the report canvas. Here you can see I have not added it to the page prompt area. I'm going to go ahead and collapse the page control area and expand my options. I'm going to highlight the slider object and change the input style to single value. Next, I need to assign the roles. Again, I will use date. And here you can see as I move the slider point value, neither of the report objects are updating. Again, remember, this is because the control object is not in one of the automatically configured areas for filtering. That is the report or page prompt areas. we will have to configure any desired filtering of these report objects ourselves. To do this, I will need to store the value selected in this single value range slider and store it in a parameter. To do this, we will need to store the selected date value in a parameter and then configure our filter using that parameter value. Let's go ahead and create our date parameter to hold this value. From our data pane, I'm going to select New Data Item and then Parameter. I'm going to name my parameter Selected Day Parameter. The type will be Date. The format will be month, day with year 4. Minimum value will be January 1, 2017. Max date will be December 31st, 2019. And I'll just pick any date for my default value. Click OK. Now we can see down on our data pane, the parameter has been defined. Now I need to assign this parameter to this control object. Now for any date that I pick on this single value slider, it will be stored in our parameter Selected Day parameter. Now we need to configure the filter boundaries. Recall from my target report that I wanted to display the 5 days prior and 5 days after this selected value. To do that, we're going to use the data pane again, New Data Item, and we're going to say New Calculated Data Item. I'm going to build out the expression first and then go back and assign data items to the expression. Remember that as we are working with SAS date, it means SAS is calculating the number of days since January 1, 1960. So we will use the treat as function to calculate the 5 days prior and 5 days after. Our final result type we want is a date. So we're going to treat as date. But in order to manipulate the actual days using a plus or minus operator, we will have to treat those dates as numbers. That is why I'm using the treat as wrapper function. So going back to our data items pane, we're going to take our selected day parameter and we're going to subtract 6 days from it. This is because I want 5 days not including the selected value. I'm going to give my new calculation a name. Make sure the result type is of date and click OK. The easiest way to calculate the 5 days after is to duplicate our expression and then change the name and the operator. I'm going to duplicate, right-click and edit. Rename this calculation to be 5 days after. And change our operation to be plus. Now we're taking our selected day parameter and moving it out 6 days to have 5 days after the selected day. We'll go ahead and click OK. Excellent. Now we have our date boundaries, which are being driven from our single value slider. Next, we need to apply a filter to our report objects. We need to activate one of the report objects. Here, I've clicked on the list table, and then I will go to the filters pane. I'm going to select New Filter, Advanced Filter, and I'm going to use the pre-built conditions over here on the left-hand side of the expression builder. I'm going to expand my date and click on Date. And here in the conditions, I'm going to say where date is between inclusive. I'm going to double click it to add it to the expression builder. And here I just need to pick my boundaries, my 5 days prior and 5 days after. I'm going to give my filter a meaningful name. And down at the bottom of the expression builder, I can see out of the total observations how many returned observations met this criteria. And I'll click OK. So here we can see I have my returned values for 5 days prior and 5 days after my selected value. I can change this filter into a common filter. That means any objects using this data source can apply this filter. By using the overflow menu, I can say change to common filter. Now, quite easily, down for the bar chart, I can activate the bar chart, and from my new filter option, I can select my common filter, the 5 days prior and after filter that I just created. Remember, in my target report, I had highlighted the selected date value. Let's go ahead and create that. One thing I need to do is create a flag in my data item to identify any rows where the date is equal to my selected date value. To create that flag data item, I'm going to say new data item, calculated item. For my flag, I'm going to create a Boolean expression where I want to compare if the date item for the row is equal to my parameter value. So if date is equal to my parameter, selected date parameter, then I'm going to return a value of 1. Otherwise, I will return 0. Let's go ahead and give a meaningful name to this data item and click OK. Since I already have the bar chart activated, I'm going to create that display rule. On my Rules tab, I'm going to create a new rule for that flag measure. If the selected date flag for that row of data is greater than 0, then I know that date matches the selected value I have in the control object. Therefore, I want to style that graph yellow. And here we can see I have selected 1/27/2019, and that is the highlighted value down below. I'll repeat the same process for creating a display rule for the list table. Again, on the Rules tab, create a new rule for my selected date flag. If it's greater than 0, then I'm going to color the background for the entire row yellow. Now you can see as I move around the slider, I have my 5 days prior, 5 days after, and the selected value is highlighted. Let's switch back to our target report to learn about the next technique. Here I'm moving on to the drop-down list type control object. In this report, I am selecting from a year-month formatted date. We can see that as I select a from and to date, both of the list table and the bar chart down below update. The list table filters and displays consecutive values from the from and to date values. However, notice the bar chart below does not display consecutive values, but instead compares the two selected months. The steps are similar where we will add the control objects, create the parameters to hold those values, and then define filters for these report objects. Let's switch back to our pre-built report. From the drop-down list page, the first thing we'll do is add our control objects to the report canvas. I'm going to expand the page control area to make sure I don't accidentally drop them in there. From my Objects tab, I will search for the drop-down list and drag it right above our list table in the report canvas. We need 2 of them, to and from, so I'll drag 2 of them and then collapse my page control area. Let's go ahead and assign our month-year category data items and give a meaningful title to these drop-down values. From the Roles pane, I'm going to select our month-year data item, and then using the Options pane, give this object a title. I'm going to repeat these steps for the next one. For the title, it will be my to parameter or my to value. And then on my roles, I'm going to select my month year data item. Now we need to create the parameters to hold these values. Back on my data pane, I'm going to use the new data item and select parameter. I'm going to give my parameter a meaningful name. The type will be of date. It's always easiest to select the desired format first. And in this case, I'm going to do the 3-month and 4-year format. And then select my min and maximum value for my data source. January 2017 is my min, and December 2019 is my max. I'm going to go ahead and select a default value and click OK. The easiest way to create the to version of this parameter is to duplicate it and change the name. I'm going to right-click on this and select Duplicate, right-click and Edit. First, I'm going to update the name of the parameter and select a different current value. Next, we need to assign these parameters to our control objects. For the from, I'm going to select the from month parameter. And for to, I'm going to select the to month parameter. Now we are able to use our drop-down and select values from and to. I tend to like my values sorted descending. Now all we need to do is assign the desired filters to the report objects. For the list table, we will use the inclusive operator again. From the filters, I will select a new advanced filter. I will expand the date and select my month year. Scroll down for my conditions to be between inclusive and double click on it to add it to the editor. And then I will use my parameters as the boundaries. My from month parameter, the lower boundary, and my to month parameter as the upper boundary. Again, validating my total observations compared to the returned observations. I'm going to go ahead and name this appropriately in case I want to make this a common filter and use it again. And click OK. In this case, for the bar chart, we wanted to create an OR condition. We wanted to compare the from and the to. So for this new filter expression, we're going to select Advanced Filter. And again, the first thing I do is build the expression. So from my operators, I want to create an OR Boolean expression where my month year equals my from or equals my to parameter. So I'm going to go ahead and drop this expression on the first condition and then the second, and then fill in my parameters. Again, checking my returned observations, clicking OK. So here now I'm comparing July 2019 to September 2019. If I wanted to compare September 2018 compared to September 2019, here I have all of the consecutive values. I'll just do a quick sort so we can see the min. And here I have September 2018 compared to September 2019 in my bar chart. Let's go ahead and switch back to our target report and look at the last example I'm going to walk through. This is using our text input control. The steps are similar to the previous, and this control will be most useful when you have thousands of date values that your user would like to filter between. You can see that as I select a date range, in this example, I can type. In this example, as I select the from and to parameters, you can see that both the list table and the line chart update. The bar chart here on the far right does not update, and this is because I am looking at all of the values for the data source for the years 2017, 2018, and 2019. I want this to be a static object for this page of the report. Let's switch back to our pre-built report and repeat our steps, where we're going to add the control object, create the parameters to hold these values, and then define the filters for the list and line chart. Moving to our last page in the report, the text input. Like before, I'm going to expand the page control area and make sure that my text input controls only fall in the report canvas. From the object pane, I'm going to search for text input. For my controls, I want it to be only above the list table and the line chart. And I need two of them for to and from. I'm going to go ahead and collapse my page control area and assign our date and give these objects a name. Here I'm going to use the date data item and give this object a title. Similarly, repeat for the second one and assign it the date category. Next, we need to build the parameters to hold these values. From our data pane and our new data item menu, I'm going to select new parameter. I'm going to give the parameter a meaningful name. The type is going to be date. My format is going to be month, day with a 4-year. And click OK. We know that my data is from January 2017 to December 31st, 2019. Give it a current value. And again, we're going to duplicate it and save it as the toDate parameter. Duplicate, right-click and edit. And give it a different current value. Click OK. Now we need to assign the roles for these control objects. For the to parameter, we're going to assign the toDate parameter. And for the from control object, we will assign the fromDate parameter. Now we just need to build our filters. Since both of our objects are going to be using the same filter, we can use a common filter once we have it defined. For the list table, on the filters pane, I'm going to select New Advanced Filter. I'm going to look for my date, and for the conditions, again, select the between inclusive, and then use the values I just created for my from and toDate parameters. My fromDate parameter and my toDate parameter. Give my filter a meaningful name. Check my returned observations and click OK. Change this to a common filter, and then use this common filter down below for my line chart. On the filters pane, new filter, click my from and toDate parameter. Now here, if I wanted to type a particular date range, I wanted to go to 7/6/2018, look at 8/6/2018, both my line chart and my list table above will update. For more information, please refer to the SAS Visual Analytics documentation or check out one of my other videos or blogs. Thank you, and check back with the Technical Insights and Expertise series for additional tips.